Dr. Ben Song risked everything when he used the Quantum Leap Accelerator to travel back in time. Now our team's working to find out why. As he leaps between bodies with no memory of who he is, he still has one hope. That his next leap takes him back to the place and people.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Quorum Productions with my co-host Stacie, here to talk about the 12th episode of the Quantum Leap revival, Let Them Play. The episode's description reads as follows. Ben finds himself in 2012 in the midst of the Mendez family as they help their transgender daughter Gia, who dreams of playing on her high school basketball team. Magic and Jen discover another piece of the puzzle of why Ben left in the first place. The episode was written and directed by Shekinah. This is her first efforts on both accounts. Shekinah is a trans activist who also appeared in this episode, and Bates Wide Wheel had her on as a guest, where she talked about the episode. I don't have that luxury. I don't have the ability to get in guest speakers from the series, but I do have a TV Line article about her involvement in this episode, if you'll pardon the indulgence. I'm going to read a little bit from it, as I believe it offers a little bit of interesting insight into the production of this episode. The episode titled Let Them Play was written and directed by trans activist Shekinah, who originally pitched it as a part of her interview for the Quantum Leap Writers' Room. Having previously starred in the NBC sitcom Connecting, co-created by Quantum Leap showrunner Martin Guerrero, the pair aimed to create a new project by Shekinah. She then joined the Quantum Leap team to help build the skills that she would need to eventually become a showrunner. She also appears in this episode as Dottie, a quirky character with game-changing information for the headquarters crew. When the episode's original director had to drop out unexpectedly, Shekinah jumped up on the opportunity. She's quoted as saying in this article, "That night, I wrote to all the executives and was like, this episode is about giving a trans person a shot, so give me a shot. I'm ready," she shares. "I've done 30 episodes of television as an actor. I wrote the episode. No one understands these characters more than me. I've trained as a director in theater, put me in coach." Shekinah received a call the next day that she was going to direct. The article goes on. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put the article in the episode's description if you want to read the whole thing. So before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. This is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, please go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you are on one of the platforms that this podcast is now listenable to, please hit me up with a follow. You can also head over to my YouTube channel, Quorum Productions, where additional content can be discovered, both Quantum Leap related and otherwise. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. All right, Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode.
All right, so love the episode. It was great. They did a great job doing what they wanted to do, which, they have described this episode as a love letter to the trans teenager, right? And to really explore the challenges that the trans community faces in America today. And it did a lot of great things. For one thing, this episode is the newest time that we've ever leaped into, right? 2012. And going into this series, I didn't know how I felt about seeing modern history. And after watching this episode, I like it. I want to see more things from current times. This is just over a decade ago, which still sounds like a long time ago, but watching it and listening to the music, which the music hit in this episode, I loved it. In 2012, I was teaching kindergarten. We didn't face this type of situation where I was working, but it wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah,
Even
my
though
daughter
it's
was
a
just
decade
being born.
ago. It's really recent, and it gave me this appreciation thinking about the original series, how it was the modern history from that time period, Sam's life. It's an appreciation that I don't think we ever felt as children watching the show, right? Because we weren't around for most of that modern history.
Yeah, Quantum Leap, the original series, tackled issues like racism.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I don't think racism is bad, was a controversial thought process. So a lot of the episodes back then weren't really that controversial, even though they did tackle a lot of social issues. The exception, of course, being Running for Honor, which at the time, gay rights, gays in the military, that was very much a hot topic.
Right, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell episode,
Mhm.
which is the closest thing we have to compare this to in the original series. It's really, I think, the only time the original series touched upon anything involving the queer community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I can't think of a single other instance where they ever did.
The only thing I can think to reference is a really poor thing that Quantum Leap did, which was in What Price Gloria, when Sam, basically implied that Samantha Stormer was not a female.
Oh, right.
And that was not a good message. He was using that as, like, in a very wrong way, to looking at it from modern eyes.
The original series had moments like that, for sure.
Yeah. It was a different time than we are today. And that's where you can really see, like, this is how history works. And if you're talking about going through history, you got to look at what is the feelings of the time. What is socially acceptable changes.
Absolutely.
And it really does. And not just, looking at, say, Sam leaping into the South in the 50s and 60s, which he did several times, and saw, all these really horrific things happening.
The Jim Crow South.
Yeah. Like, even looking at 1990, when the show was made, we can see now all of these differences in a really meta way, where the perspective of the show itself changes.
Yeah, it changes with the times. I thought this was a very good episode, cheesy in spots. And
yeah, it was a little...
it kind of had a sports movie vibe.
Right.
So,
like a high school kind of,
it
was a little easy, I think.
Yeah. Definitely.
The resolution of this episode was too easy. And it makes sense that they did it that way, because they were already giving us some, like, really deep and heavy material. And if the story itself got too heavy, it would have been too much to fit in 40-odd minutes of television.
And it wouldn't really have fit with the show that it has been up to this point.
Right, but...
Or even the original show.
Given that, even though I do love the story they told, I think everybody who acted in this episode did phenomenal. There were really great moments, really great scenes, really great scripting and dialogue. What we were talking about before we started recording is I have an issue with the quantum leapness of this episode.
Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about when we get there?
We can talk about it when we get there, but just the basic idea to keep in mind as we talk is I don't know what Ben really changed by being here.
And I definitely had the same issue.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in detail as we hit each scene, but I feel like a step was missed in the leap of it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a very well done episode tackling a tough subject that is extremely hot button right now.
Yeah.
Specifically transgender athletes in sports.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it really takes a position that I thought it would, that they should just play. Maybe in the high school level, but they didn't go into the Olympics or
they didn't really get into the conversation which this topic revolves around.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were more focusing on, here is the life of this transgender teenager in general. And they didn't really get into the politics of the sports.
And I don't think it really needed to.
No.
So I think what they did was the right call. Nevertheless, I suspect that this episode will make a lot of people angry.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't suspect that. I know that.
Right. We saw that before the episode even aired.
And to that, I say good.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Art, yes, can be used for escapism and entertainment, but art, such as television shows, movies, etc., can also be used to be provocative and to jumpstart conversations and to present different points of view.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, some of this is going to make people angry, and that's a very good thing.
there, of course, there's hate spreading around social media revolving this episode.
This time I went looking for it. And I definitely found
I
some.
specifically didn't go looking for it.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't want to
but...
read it, but I know it's there.
Yeah.
I can say that Twitter community really stepped it up, and there was way more positivity and love
Absolutely.
for this episode and for this series in general than the negativity. And I can say one thing is the people who are really going poo-poo caca on this didn't actually watch the episode. I promise you they didn't. So who cares?
Right.
Who cares what they think? You're not watching. We don't care about your opinion.
This is very much in keeping with the original series. For instance, the episode Black on White on Fire, as I, repeatedly mispronounced, and Stacie is giving me a thumbs up. We're actually saying it right. In the original series, which was about the Watts riots, at the time that that episode aired, a lot of people were also angry about that. And it wasn't just, the white people that were mad about it. Black people were also mad, according to Deborah Pratt. Pretty much everybody was mad about that episode. And we talked about Running for Honor, which tackled gays in the military. That was highly controversial during its initial airing. It aired in 1992, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell, instituted by a liberal president, I should add, Bill Clinton, was put into place in 1993. It was finally abolished in 2011 by Obama. So this episode, while not perfect, is carrying on with the tradition of the original show, no matter what some fans might say. And, they've said plenty of negative things, but there's also, as you said, plenty of positive things being said about this episode.
Yeah, I think overall it was really well received, and I'm proud of the entire Quantum Leap fan community for rallying together. And big kudos to everybody involved in this. Like I said, the acting was great. Shakina, awesome on all fronts. It's amazing to me that she was able to pull 3 different roles in fulfilling this episode, and they all turned out great.
Yeah, I was a little worried when I heard that she was also going to appear in this episode, because I thought she would be taking away from Ian. But that turned out not to be the case.
Oh, yeah. Ian shined in this episode.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about that when we get to, the Ian of it all. But, yeah. And it was very subtle, too, right? Ian didn't take over the episode.
No.
Ian just had really great moments. And all of Ian's scenes were phenomenal.
Absolutely. There's one more thing that I kind of want to get into before we actually get into the episode itself. A little bit of a diatribe. I just want to be clear on where I stand and where I am with all this. I support the LGBT community. I think I said all those letters right?
LGBTQ?
Yes. Did I say that? No.
And then there's like some other letters that
there's an I in there now?
Know. I think when you see it completely spelled out, it's really long, and then there's a plus sign at the end.
Yeah, I don't care what all that is.
There's more letters than I'm capable of computing, but LGBTQ.
Right.
Yes,
I
that's
always
where
mix
my
it up.
brain stops.
Every single time I mix it up. I've done a few videos about the community, at least one related to the mental health aspects of it. However, I'll admit that I am a bit out of touch with the issues on the table.
And we both fall into that category as cis white people.
Right. I'm not as familiar with the gender identity issues that we're talking about. I'm not exactly okay boomer territory, but I'm not with this younger generation.
Yeah,
totally.
we are zennials.
Right. I think I'm a very old millennial at this
we
point.
fall right in that cusp.
So I'm not exactly a great spokesperson for these issues. For these issues, you'll note from time to time that I struggle with the whole pronoun thing. I refer to Ian as a he more than a few times.
Yeah, it is unintentional.
I have corrected myself on a few occasions, and sometimes I just kind of forget to. These are not my issues, but they don't need to be, because I am an empathetic person, and I preach on more than a few occasions that we need more empathy and less judgment.
Love, peace, and understanding.
This goes against our biological programming, but then again, so do most things that society asks us to do. True empathy, putting yourself in another man's shoes, as Ben so often does week to week, and Sam did in the original series, to truly understand where a person is coming from, is not easy. It's hard. It's hard work. And oftentimes it's not rewarding, because you don't always get the same energy back. But I feel it's necessary to move forward as a society and to help to improve the mental health situation in this country for everyone, but especially for the LGBTQ community and trans people. I said it right that time, right? Okay. And it's funny because the person that embodies what I preach is my daughter. And I hope that's something that life doesn't beat out of her, that she'll, as she grows up, continue to have that level of empathy. And I guess that's all I really wanted to say about that. I also don't really have a position on the sports aspect of the trans conversation.
Yeah. And I know last week we were talking about this off air, and you brought up a good point that there is a conversation to be had there. You know,
absolutely.
Outside of bigotry and hate, there is a conversation. You know, there are real life issues that come up in talking about this scenario specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a black and white issue.
No, absolutely
It's not I'm against trans people or I support trans people. There's a lot more to it than that, you know?
Right.
Life is complicated, and issues are complicated. That's why they're issues.
Yeah, like I said, I support the community.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean I necessarily agree with every position that they have. And that goes for anybody, really, when it comes down to it.
Right. There's always things to consider for everybody's well-being.
Absolutely. This is a hot topic issue, and it should be. We should be getting together, not name-calling, but having a conversation about how all these various issues fits into the sports world. This episode doesn't really have that conversation as much.
No.
It does a little bit, though.
I mean, really, in this episode, we have, the family is super supportive, which is a different perspective than you usually see when touching these type of topics. Is we have this super supportive parents to the point that it becomes an issue of itself, right? I think one thing
they actually go to the the extreme.
One thing you can pull out of this episode, besides talking about the trans community, is it really talks of parenting styles and how there is such a thing as being too supportive and the way that people are supportive. So I really think there's a lot to say in that.
They were supportive to the point where they were almost controlling.
They were hindering her.
Unhealthy degree, I would say.
But you have that side of it where you have the supporters, and then we had really two characters who were opposed. Now then there was also these people in the stands during both games spewing hate, okay, but they were kind of in the background. We really only had two characters that were really against Gia playing, and that's Amanda and her mother Marjorie.
Yep.
And those were really the two people that we got that perspective from. And then there is the principal.
Oh,
the principal.
I have things to say about her for sure. That was painful.
Principal Jane Krager, she was, representing the school, the administration, and really her take was, we don't want to get involved. And she wasn't against it.
Mm.
She was against taking a position.
Right.
And so really there's three sides of this coin, right?
Yeah.
You've got the support, the people who don't support, and then the administration's stance of, we don't want to be involved. We don't want to make these decisions. We want to pretend this issue doesn't exist.
And that is pretty typical in the general population when we're talking about issues. There will be people if we're talking about race issues, there's people who support you, people who pretend to support you, people who don't support you at all, and people who don't want to be involved.
Right.
And that's pretty much how it goes. This episode opens with Ben finding himself the coach of a basketball team.
And
you want more?
No, just the introduction in this episode. I've noticed that, that little introduction blurb is getting tweaked from week to week.
Mm.
And it hit really good in this episode. It was so beautifully that it goes from here's this blurb straight into previously on. Where it's all one sequence.
I did notice they changed that up.
Yeah, and
that opening
they're
dialogue.
changing it every episode. To fit in, here's what we know now. Here's the new part of the story. And I think it's really beautiful done. I really noted, wow, that's great. And, to hear her say, quotes from the original blurb, about trying to put right what once went wrong.
Right.
And she said that before, but I don't know, the specific recording of this blurb just felt really good to me.
The recording that I kept including in the beginning of these podcasts, there's that really Shatner-esque pause that Addison has that's really bad. But so I'm glad that they actually straightened that out and made it a little bit cleaner. Yeah,
and it just, like I said, instead of having a blurb and then having a previously on segment to remind us of what's going on, it was really just this seamless introduction, and I thought it was great. And then we jump right into the leap, and right away we hit what I was talking about with the music.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I sung along through this whole episode. It was perfect. I loved it.
So the team is tied. Their star player, Amanda, is hurt.
She hurts her ankle.
She wants to get back in there, but, she can barely even walk.
She can't stand on it. She can't play.
I don't know how she thinks that she can go out there and do anything.
The issue is that there's a scout from Stanford in the stands who is scouting her, and Ben made the right decision. He pulled Amanda from the game.
Right.
Now, this is the same decision that Coach Carlos Mendez did.
Right.
In the original history, he pulled Amanda from the game, and they played short a player. Which, are you even allowed to do that?
I don't know. I'm not really sure, but I think you can.
But that's what happened, is they played short a player, and Gia ends up running away. That's the original history.
Right.
Now, I imagine the reason she ran away is because
she was pissed at her father.
Her dad decided to play short a player and not put her in, and the whole reveal of, well, why we didn't put you in comes out, and she runs away.
In the new history, that comes out much later in the
right,
episode.
But I'm assuming it was really the same reason that she ran away, is because we find out that she was never actually supposed to play. Okay, so anyways, Ben's there. There's, 30-something seconds on the clock.
Yep, they're
and
tied.
He realizes he's the coach. The ref is looking at him, and he calls timeout and says, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, Addison ends up arriving to tell Ben that originally they lost the game in 2012.
So all he knows so far is, I'm the coach. They're about to lose this game. I got 35 seconds to make them win this game.
And he points to number 23, who he does not know.
Does not know is trans.
Right. Doesn't know who this person is at all.
This person is his daughter.
Right.
All he knows is they're short a player. He pulls Amanda because she is clearly injured and can't play.
Yeah, she's delusional thinking that she can.
Every other person on the bench besides number 23 was also injured. We saw a girl in a cast.
Yeah.
So she was literally the only option. So it makes logical sense that he's like, okay, you play.
I mean, what would you do in that same situation? And she asks, are you sure? And he's like, well, you're part of the team, aren't you? The game resumes. Ben seems to be doing a decent job coaching. Gia marches down the court and scores the winning basket. The team celebrates, but there are boos from the crowd shouting, cheater! Ben is confused until Addison points out that Gia is trans. Ben looks at Gia, and she's upset and says, whatever, Dad, and runs off. Addison adds, oh yeah, and she's your daughter, too. And credits. After the credits, Ben is in the hallway, admiring the wall, which shows all the championships they won. He looks at his badge to find out his name is Carlos, and asks out loud, what am I doing here, Carlos? Carlos is going to be able to answer the question.
Yeah. Oh, and just really quick to say, during that basketball scene, while we're getting this awesome music playing, they did give us our setting. We didn't get a date. It just said 2012 Lake Hill High School in this very, high school movie font up on the screen. So we got that as our setting, and we got Ben looking at the name tag. Never in this episode did Addison say, it's this date, it's 2012, your name is Carlos Mendez. She never got any of that in, so it was all context clues.
I'm pretty positive that this was not after December 13th.
Probably not. I don't know when high school basketball season is.
Actually, could be. It was around that time, November-ish, if I recall correctly. So it's pretty close to when my daughter was going to be born, but she's not quite born yet.
So he was asking Carlos, why am I here? He's, of course, trying to figure it out. This information was a shock to him, that he may have just made a decision that was a lot bigger deal than he thought it was.
Right. Yeah, so we cut to the locker room. Gia is not among them. They discuss the situation, the players. Some of them are for Gia.
And most of them seem supportive of her. Yeah. They're her friends. And really the person who has the most outcry is Amanda, this girl who hurt her ankle. And I think her biggest problem right now is she's so upset because she failed in front of this scout that was in the crowd. And, she's blaming it on Gia because Gia got to take her shot.
Right. Well, you should really blame it on your ankle more than anything. But I don't think that's the only part of her problem. I definitely think she's uncomfortable around Gia in general. We do see that throughout the episode. But yeah, so one of the girls asks, her, well, what's your issue? That she's trans and in the game, or the fact that she took your shot? And she says, well, both.
Yeah.
The one who's the most supportive of her basically is like, well, way to be a great teammate. And in the hallway, we're back with Ben. He's approached by the principal, who, I should point out, is black. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason I'm pointing this out. Because she's basically one of the antagonists of the episode. And her position is rather remarkable. You say she doesn't take a position. But given the fact that she's black and all the struggles throughout history against this, with discrimination and not having equal rights, specifically in this country, it's depressing that this person is not more in support of Gia.
Right. And again...
But it's also very true to life.
I definitely got from her that her position, yes, is Gia should not play. But the only reason she thinks Gia should not play is because she doesn't want the school to get involved in making a decision. Of course, not making a decision is a decision.
Yes.
But I really don't think she's coming from a position of, I don't think trans people should play.
No, I don't think she's
coming from a position of
hateful, but
the school cannot be involved in any controversy. That's her entire issue. And it is pointed out to us soon that, Gia is the first out trans student at this school. Mm. This is not something, that any of these people have had a topic they've had to really think about before,
Right.
And I think she's doing a poor job as an administrator.
I think she's doing a poor job as an administrator and as a person.
And as a human being. Right. But I can see her motivation is, I have to protect the school, and the school can't be involved in a controversy, and this feels controversial. So my stand is, I'm not going to get involved. And I don't think she realizes that by not getting involved, she's opposing.
And she also doesn't realize the irony, because if, we go back 50 years, maybe even sooner than that, they would have been saying the same thing about her.
Right.
Which I think she misses throughout the episode.
Yeah. And I told you in 2012 I was teaching. We had a black female principal at the school I worked in.
Oh, yeah.
So I felt like this link to this whole administrative scenario here.
Okay, so she's giving Ben hell for putting Gia in the game.
Yeah, she said, we talked about this.
And of course, Ben doesn't remember that because he wasn't there. She tells him that she has to keep the entire school together, dealing with budget issues, yada, yada, yada. She doesn't want Ben to ask her to fight a culture war for his daughter. And again, that's totally a remarkable position for her to be taking.
It's a terrible position for her to be taking. But I don't feel like she's coming from a place of hate.
Oh, no, she's absolutely not.
She's coming from a place of, I don't think she's really looking at it with the right perspective.
Absolutely not.
She's very close-minded about what's happening in front of her.
She tells him to do his job and get the team back to regional, and then leaves. And she's trailed by the assistant principal, Giffen, who doesn't really speak.
Is that who he was? He's the assistant principal? Yeah. I wasn't sure what his role was in the school other than union rep, which we're told at the end.
I ended up looking at the Internet Movie Database credits, and he was credited as the assistant principal.
Okay. See, I only looked at IMDb prior to the episode airing, and he wasn't on the list yet.
Right. Yeah, I do it after.
Because it updates after the episode. I got a lot of characters from there, but he wasn't on there yet when I looked.
Ben's no good day continues when he gets chewed out by Amanda's mother, Marjorie.
Oh, well, before that.
Oh.
Actually, a lot of stuff happened before that. Did you move to the wrong page?
Yeah. What are we talking about?
Well, to that scene, we found out that Gia is changing in the janitor's closet.
That actually happens after.
No, it didn't.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that, they had that conversation with Marjorie, and according to my notes anyway, she has that conversation with Margie, and then we see Gia changing in the janitor's closet. And that actually ends that whole hallway scene.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. She did come out briefly. Okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
I was thinking of a different encounter they had a little bit later. I
Gotcha.
completely forgot that she was in that scene at all.
All right, so Marjorie is the definition of a Karen, saying that her daughter could have played, she could have stayed in the game, don't know how. She's talking about the scouts and all that.
Yeah, this was such a moment. I completely erased this little
really
dialogue from anything. Yeah,
gotcha. All right.
This is Amanda's mom.
Mm-hmm. This
is the first time we meet her.
And what an introduction it is.
Yeah, she recurs through the episode, and she basically was like, "Don't tell me how to parent."
And I would have loved for Ben to come back with, "Well, don't tell me how to coach my team." But he doesn't. He basically says nothing because he's pretty ineffectual throughout this episode.
He's still
he doesn't know how to react.
What is going on?
Right.
He's just astonished that any of this is happening.
All right, so Ben asks one of the players that comes out after Marjorie leaves if she's in the locker room, which she is not because she's changing in the janitor's closet, as we just talked about. The door opens to reveal Gia, who ends up knocking things over and knocking a mop over, and she's like, "Anyone ask for a mop?" And I appreciate this episode making the jokes for me. I didn't have to make this joke. But also I could really relate to knocking things over and tripping over mops. It's something, it made me feel connected to her, being this klutzy. But anyway, we cut to the present where Ian is discussing what's going on with the leap, with Addison. Apparently, Ian remembers that basketball game. Mm-hmm. He was going to school at the same time, but not at that high school.
At a different LA area high school.
I had to watch this a second time to actually get that because I thought he was actually at that high school at the time, but he was not.
Another local LA. They're both, these are both in the LA area. And Ian kind of has this idolization of Gia. He says, "I didn't know her, but I knew of her. Like, she was iconic." Right.
Before iconic was a thing we called things.
Yeah. And this was like a kind of wow moment, right? That this is new information. Mm-hmm. We have confirmed with this scene that the people at the project do not retain memories of the original timeline.
Yes, which is interesting because sometimes it was different in the original series where we saw Al retain memories.
Now,
but we do have a justification for that.
I think it might be different for Addison. Mm-hmm. I think if Addison had a core memory related to something happening in a leap, I think it might be different for her simply because she's the one in the imaging chamber and directly involved in the leap. Mm-hmm.
And plus they're connected via the
brain stuff.
Yeah, the neuro.
I'm not going to say that this
neurons and mesons.
I'm not going to say that this confirms what Addison might experience. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about Addison, right?
No,
we don't know.
It's about Ian.
This is about Ian. But we've confirmed here that Ian remembers the new history.
Right.
Like that was the original history. Addison had to tell Ian, "Wait a minute, you remember her winning this game. She only won this game because Ben just put her in 2 minutes ago. This just changed." Mm-hmm. And of course, Ian understands this because Ian is the one who controls Ziggy, and Ian is kind of astonished by this because I don't think Ian realized that they would experience a change this way.
Right.
And we kind of touched on this. Like, I know there was a conversation about it during Oh Ye of Little Faith when Ian was actively researching something, and then the page 40, is it a 404?
404, I think.
Is that the error?
Yeah.
When suddenly that Reddit post disappeared, mm-hmm. and Ian had to retain knowledge. But that's because these weren't memories Ian had outside of this day.
It was memories that he was researching at that
for
moment.
this leap.
Right.
So here we're touching on something that this person remembers from their life happening, and they're told, guess what? This is a brand new memory. You didn't have this memory an hour ago. And that's got to be a crazy thing to realize and comprehend.
Right. No.
All at the same time.
Yeah, but Ian handles it pretty well. Ian ends up saying that what Gia needs is an accomplice, not an ally.
Yeah, which that's not a phrase. Like, ally, I know. I had never heard the phrase accomplice in relation to the LGBTQ community. This was new information for me. And that repeats throughout this episode, that concept. And so that was, I was like, wow, I learned something here.
Well, I'm not sure if that's actually a thing. I didn't look into it any further. Like, I think that was just something that Ian was saying. I don't know if that's actually part of the LGBT.
I didn't look it up, but I did feel like they were saying this is a concept.
Well, if somebody is listening, if you'd like to give us some insight onto whether this is actually a thing or not, let us know. I could actually look it up later too, but feel free to comment anyway.
Yeah, so Ian tells us during this conversation, I still remember Gia running away, which means just because they won the game doesn't mean that history has changed.
Winning a game doesn't fix everything.
Timeline, Gia ran away. And in this current timeline, after playing this game and winning, Gia runs away. And Ian says, well, because I remember it, that must still happen.
Right.
And one thing they kind of left this topic. We didn't keep going back to, Ian, what do you remember?
Right.
And I kind of wish we got rolling updates of Ian's memory as the leap was changing. I feel like there was a good perspective here to have that they kind of dropped the topic after this. Maybe because that would get a little confusing.
Right.
If we really address how often does a timeline actually change. It's constantly in motion, when a leaper is actively making changes every second.
Right. So then we cut to Magic and Jen, who go to a coffee shop to meet Dottie. That's the character played by Shekinah.
Yes, so here we are, and we go into this scene we haven't talked about yet in this episode where we left off last episode, right?
Yes.
So this scene, all we get is Jen telling Magic, here's where we're at and here's why we're here.
Right. And
I feel like it was a total letdown from where we were left last week.
It was. And initially I'm like, you're kidding me.
Right. It all comes together at the end.
It does. But when we're first watching, it's like, this is where we're going with this?
Here's what I wrote. I wrote, the name was given off screen. We didn't even get to see it happen, which there was speculation that they weren't going to bring Georgina Riley in for this episode.
Well, what's interesting is she's credited in this episode, but she doesn't appear.
Well, I know she was only like hired to be in so many episodes, so there was speculation they weren't gonna like extend that scene over 2 episodes. But it was given off screen, fine. But remember what I said last week?
It had to be somebody we know.
It has to be a name we know. Otherwise, why was it cliffhanger? Now, and I like where we went with this. I'm comfortable with it at this point. But seeing this scene where Jen's just like, yeah, we're going to meet this person, and according to Janice, this is the person who contacted Ben 6 months before he left. And we're given the name Dottie. Why last week could we not have seen, I'm going to give you a name, the name is Dottie. And then we were just left on who's Dottie.
Yeah.
Instead, we were left on, what's the name?
Right. So,
like the name itself was going to be a reveal.
Yeah, my feeling last week was if you're going to not say the name, it has to be someone you know. Like you were saying, it can't be a random nobody. That cannot be the cliffhanger. If next week you're coming in and it's a random nobody.
Yeah.
Like, so initially I was like, oh, come on, guys.
So we find out that the name is Dottie, but then, well, Dottie is Shekinah, which I was excited to see. So I was like, okay, I'm okay with this. I had seen, the images of Dottie in the promo photos, had it put together that's the name, right? And the outfit that Dottie was wearing in that first time we meet her, that was in the promo photos, love the outfit. She looked amazing. So this is Jen and Magic, and what happened off screen is Janice gave Addison the name of Dottie and this location of where we can find Dottie, presumably. Jen, being Jen, didn't believe a word Janice said and went and hacked into this. Is it a coffee shop or bar.
It seems to me like it's a coffee shop.
It's-
That was the general impression that I got.
It's this place where they comment. This doesn't seem like the type of place Ben would go. Jen hacked into their security
Video camera
cameras
system, yeah.
and, got these images. There's these printed images of Ben talking to Dottie to confirm Janice's story that Ben was here 6 months before leaving.
And as it turns out, Dottie is acting, like...
Dottie's suspicious.
Yeah.
Who are you people?
Mhm.
What do you want?
And she seems to, like, when Magic actually mentions the date, I think it was Magic that mentioned it.
Yeah, so first, she's like, didn't want to talk to them at all, because they said, oh, we're friends of Dottie's. Is she here? And she's like, well, I'm Dottie. You're not my friends. And Dottie gave us this impression that Dottie believes in conspiracy theories. Dottie thinks people are watching her and listening to her. Dottie doesn't want to talk. Dottie didn't want to talk to them at all.
Yeah.
She says she's suspicious of them. And then Magic mentions the date, which was March 12th, 2022. That's the date this picture was taken. That's the day you talked to Ben. Dottie was saying, I have no idea who that is. I've never seen him before. Well, here's a picture of you and him together. Which it would make sense if this was just some random customer that came in that she doesn't know who it is.
Right.
Like, that's plausible in and of itself. But when Magic mentioned that date, you could tell it meant something to Dottie. And she says, that's the week that... And suddenly she was willing to talk to Jen and Magic. But she said, I cannot talk here. The owners are sus. You cannot be here right now. That's what she said. Come back tomorrow to the poetry slam.
Right. So Ben comes home with Gia in the past.
Yep.
Her mother sounds supportive. But as soon as Gia is out of the room, it's time for Ben to get some more shit.
Yeah, so this is, the mother's character name is Miriam.
Miriam. I actually didn't look up the name. But she's upset that he put Gia in the game without telling her, that they kept her out of the spotlight for a reason.
Yeah.
A reason Ben genuinely doesn't know. But he tries to defend Gia being in the game, but the wife just constantly shuts him down. And Ben ends up saying, look, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. And she's like, yeah, you're right, you weren't thinking, and now we're all going to have to pay the consequences.
And we also learned that off camera after the game, Amanda's mom, Margie, called Gia's mom, Miriam, and was giving her all kinds of shit about what's going on.
The blood doping stuff.
Yeah, saying...
I didn't know who made that call because, like, the dialogue is so rapid fire that sometimes I miss these type of details.
Yeah,
but,
and there were a lot of names in this episode.
Right.
It was a little hard to follow some, but yeah, like, it was Amanda's mom who called Gia's mom and was, like, questioning her hormones.
Right.
Obviously Gia's taking hormones. That's part of the trans journey. And was equating that to doping.
Right.
And coming from a really hateful and misunderstanding place.
It's funny because, we talk about women or transgender people in sports playing on women's teams because the argument is that it'll give them an advantage. But if you actually look at Gia does not. It's not like Gia's like super buff or anything.
Right.
She's like a twig, basically.
Right. And it's hard to follow why Marjorie is so upset about this because you're on the same team. I can see someone from the opposing team using this as a reason to be upset.
Well, her entire perspective is filtered through, like, wanting to protect her daughter,
right.
wanting what's best for her daughter.
And she says her daughter's not getting a fair chance because Gia is in the picture, which is ridiculous. It's pure jealousy,
right?
Honestly, when you get down to it.
That's where I'm going with it.
But it just seems so ridiculous to me that you're going to take this stance of, I have a problem with your daughter. Your daughter, Gia just won the game.
Right.
If it wasn't for her, they would have lost. Mm-hmm. Your daughter, her ankle, she could not play.
Right.
Regardless of if Gia played or not. And you should be happy that your daughter's team is now one step closer to regionals.
Right. Where your daughter will get another chance to, impress the scouts potentially.
Yeah.
And further her possible career.
Just the whole thing's just really ridiculous to me. But at the same time, it's believable.
There are people like this.
It's sad. It's really sad, but it is believable that this is happening. in the absurdity that is.
Yes, unfortunately, people like this exist.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's unbelievable. I'm just saying, this person.
You're criticizing the character, not the writers of this episode
absolutely.
in this specific instance. Ben is getting ready to go to sleep on the couch, as he's now in the doghouse. We didn't actually see, hey, you can sleep on the couch, but yeah, that's what ends up happening.
I feel like they did that a lot in this episode, where things were just kind of left for interpretation and not spelled out as much as we sometimes see.
That is a problem for me in this episode and in the series in general. Sometimes I kind of wish that these episodes were 2 hours long so that they could properly tell the story that they're trying to tell. Because a lot of times the stories they're telling are just too big to tell in 40 minutes.
And there's so much, what I'm saying specifically here is, there's so much that is just visual clues, and if you blink, you miss it.
Right.
And, someone who's taking notes about the episodes, a lot of times on first view, I miss things. And when I watch it again, I'm like, oh, wow, I totally missed this happening or that happening.
I totally missed some things on first view that I caught in the second view.
Yeah.
Because it's so rapid fire, the pacing.
Right. And it's constantly like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what television is today. You have to fill every second or the audience gets bored. Which is kind of sad, I think, in and of itself. But anyways.
All right, so Addison appears. Gia came out as trans in the 5th grade, moved to this school this year.
Yeah.
And she's the first trans kid to go to this school, which we did mention earlier.
And she also talks about how Carlos has been Gia's coach on both sides of her transition. So at some point previously, Gia was playing on boys' teams.
Mm-hmm. And
basically, the father, Carlos, has made his entire career around coaching his daughter's sports teams. Which fits into that discussion, which we touched upon, about how the parents are just doing too much.
Right.
He's made his entire career moving around to put his daughter on different sports teams.
So yeah, that's a nuance that I didn't quite catch.
Yeah. I don't follow. And maybe one problem I have with this is we went to a really small high school, right?
Yes.
Where coaches were not independent paid positions.
Mm-hmm.
They were teachers at the school who coached the teams.
Mm-hmm.
But this is his career. He is hired as the girls basketball coach.
Right.
And previous to this, he was employed as coaches on other teams following his daughter's journey.
Right.
I don't know. Does that not feel weird to you?
It does. Now that you mention it, I don't see where he thinks he's going after this, because it's not like he's going to go pro.
Right.
He's not going to go from coaching basketball in high school to being a college coach.
But if you look at this, it's not just coincidence that, I'm the coach and, my daughter is the controversial player here. He's the coach in order to be there for her. Mm-hmm. He's being a ridiculous helicopter parent by literally implementing himself into every aspect of her life, because he and his wife both feel that if they're not literally on top of her every second, she's going to be not okay.
And by the way, this kind of helicoptering parents, it does not do good things for a child's mental health when they grow into adulthood.
Right.
I've read things about that helicopter parenting is not the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, what we'll find out later is literally getting her on the team in the uniform was part of the condition of him being hired. Mm. Literally all out. The whole reason he is in this job is so his daughter can be on this team.
Right.
And not play.
Right.
It's just a lot. It's a lot.
Ben ends up wondering, what would he know about supporting a trans kid? And Addison points out that what does any parent know about supporting a trans kid? In fact, in Ben's case, what does he know about supporting any kid at all?
Right.
He's not a father. Addison brings up the trans military ban.
Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what I was expecting.
Right. This was actually a ban in place for a while, but then they got rid of it. Trump brought it back in 2017. I don't know. I don't remember ever hearing that it was repealed, that they'd stopped doing that.
Well, based on what Addison was saying, is they overturned it. So right. I'm sure that's
accurate.
Sure that's true. And this really is exactly what I was expecting was Addison's perspective from a military standpoint. And
what's interesting, though, is that they did that in the original series.
Right.
In the Running for Honor episode.
Yes.
They had Al take the unpopular position that, gays should not be in the military.
Right.
And it was kind of brave of the creators to saddle their character with that position
Absolutely.
at the time.
But also, Al is a career military man born in the 1930s.
Cool, yeah.
So that's the position you would expect him to have.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And Al is he's a very liberal character for
His time.
who he is,
Right.
But also it's fitting that he took that perspective. And I think Al's character grew during that episode.
Oh, he absolutely did. He came to see the error of his ways.
He was part of that whole discussion. And I'm glad they didn't put Addison in that light.
I don't think you could have done that.
No, you couldn't have. And again, this goes back to 1990, 92 was a very different place than where we are now.
Right.
So no, this wouldn't have worked if they gave Addison the perspective of, yeah, I supported that. That would not have flown. Instead, Addison came from a perspective of she feels bad that she didn't speak out against it when it was happening.
Right. She couldn't have changed the decision, but she could have done something for the people in her command or under her command.
Yeah, she didn't speak out at all, and she regrets that.
She says that just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. I would actually go a little further than that and say if it's hard, then it's even more worthwhile.
Right. Absolutely.
Ziggy says that Gia ran away and was never found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't know what happened to her. So if you don't stop her from running away, she's never going to be heard from again.
So the next scene, we have a happy family scene in the morning where it's revealed that Gia's mom, what was her name again?
Miriam.
Miriam is actually a feminist. And that's a random detail that was thrown out. I'm not sure how that fits, but...
Well, it sort of fits in her discussion with Marjorie later, where, they come to this little place of understanding, talking about women's rights in sports.
Right.
But yeah, it's not really...
Not really relevant.
Yeah.
Ben suggests that Gia and him go shoot some hoops after breakfast, but Gia points out that she isn't 10. Do you have to be only 10 years old to go shoot some hoops with your father? You can't, do it now? Yeah,
I don't know. It seems silly being she's on the basketball team and her dad's her coach.
Right. Well, you could practice, get some shots.
Right. I mean, it seems silly that she'd object to this.
Oh, yeah. But Gia also points out that there's a car wash that they're going to, which is in support of the basketball team, I guess?
Yeah, it was a booster club thing to raise money for sports.
And they also need to go to a support group for trans people. They have a busy morning.
Yeah. And it's all news to Ben, of course.
Right, you're right. At the trans group, we are introduced to, what was her name again?
Kate.
I have the actress's name. Kate, okay.
So Kate is the kind of like the leader of this support group for transgender teens and their parents.
Gia goes to hang out with her friends, and the parents talk about their kids. How people making the trans kids out to be boogeyman when they're just kids, really, when it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of they talk about their kids growing up and telling the parents who they actually are, and these parents are in support of their kids, which isn't always the case.
Right.
In a lot of cases, the parents do not end up supporting their kids the way they should, and this scene is kind of... I have an issue with this scene.
Do you?
Yes, the whole where we see the kids looking straight at the camera deal. I think that's a little cheesily done. I like the content of the scene. I just don't really necessarily like how it was done. In that TV Line article, Shakina says that she didn't want the episode to feel like an after-school special.
Mm-hmm.
This moment felt like an after-school special for me.
Okay. See, I liked this scene.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I don't know, I really liked the way they did it. So I kind of looked at it more like this is a meta moment. Like they brought in all of these trans kids, real life trans kids to do this scene. I doubt any of them were actors.
Right. Okay.
They brought them in and they're just kind of showing them to us, showing them the faces behind this discussion.
And what's good about this episode, and is that they had so many trans characters actually in the episode.
Oh, right, absolutely.
I didn't expect there to be as many as there was.
I mean, we have Gia,
right?
Who is played by Jocelyn Aguilera, and I remember they were, trying to find just the right person to play that part. And of course, we've got Shakina playing Dottie, and then this Kate character is transgender as well.
And then we have these kids,
and then you've got all these kids who aren't, they're not credited because they don't have any lines, but you can see they're really like. And, they call this episode a love letter to the teen trans. Mm-hmm. That's who they're talking to, is these kids,
Right.
They're showing people at home watching this, like, you're not alone. Look at these faces of your peers.
And that is definitely an important message. Not just for transgender people, but everybody in general.
Right. Absolutely. Like, nobody should ever feel alone. And even if your struggle, whatever you're facing in your personal life, makes you feel isolated and unworthy, as we'll get to with our discussion with Ian in a little bit, like, you're not alone. You're never alone. There are always people out there who will come at you with a place of understanding. You might have to find them. Mm-hmm. And, these support groups do exist for every possible scenario you can think of. There's a support group. And if you're struggling with something, reach out and look for your people that can help you. The people who are going to have faced things similar to whatever you're facing in your life.
Absolutely. So we cut to Ian watching that same scene of the kids playing around from, I guess, the monitors of the project.
Yeah, that's something unique to this project, is they have full control of watching and hearing everything that's happening because of the way their imaging chamber technology is different from our original imaging chamber.
She's joined by Addison. Ian is emotional, and this is the kind of scene that I was hoping for when we were announced at this episode.
Yeah. Now, I wrote down, we're going to cue the Addison and Ian heart-to-heart. We talked about there's always heart-to-hearts. But it was a great scene, though.
We did talk about that last week, but in this specific instance, it was very much appropriate.
Yes.
And it was a great scene.
Right. We don't need every project scene to be a heart-to-heart.
Right.
But this one nailed it.
It is revealed that Ian tried to kill themselves around the age of 13. And since the episode is giving me the space to do this, I thought I'd bring in some statistics.
Which Ian did as well.
Yes, he actually, his statistics contradicts one of the ones I had regarding mental health in this community.
Okay.
According to Medical News Today, the U.S. Transgender Survey shows that 39% of the respondents reported serious psychological distress. That's compared to 5% of the rest of the population. 40% of the respondents noted that they had attempted suicide in their lifetime, which is 9 times higher than the attempted suicide rate of the general populace. Ian quotes here that it's 1 in 5 transgender people who attempt suicide, which is about 20%.
I can't account for the difference.
Okay.
Ian didn't say 1 in 5 trans people have attempted suicide. Ian quoted 1 in 5 trans children have attempted suicide.
Okay, so that is a different statistic.
So it is a different statistic.
And meaning, that is scary, honestly.
Meaning that maybe more people tried later in life to get to the statistics you're looking at.
All right, that makes sense. The Trevor Project says that there's more than 2 in 3 transgender non-binary youth report symptoms of major depressive disorder. I remember reading somewhere, I don't remember where exactly, I think I have it in a video that I'll probably provide the link for, that those who find support within their family have better mental health outcomes than those that don't. Now that seems like an obvious statement, but nevertheless, that is one of the statistics. And it's an obvious result. If you have support, you have better mental health outcome in general.
But then again, we have that shown in this episode. Even if you're trying to be supporting, you might not be providing the right support. Right.
Yeah, in this case, Gia's parents are supportive, but at the same time, they go about it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Ian sounds like a person who didn't have support. Gia does have support, but as we've talked about and just mentioned, it's the wrong kind of support. And like I said, this was a great scene between Ian and Addison. Did you have anything else to add about it?
No, it was like you said, a great scene. And Addison tells Ian, if you ever find yourself in a dark place again. I'm here for you. And, you know, it plays on how we've already knew that they're really close.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're kind of best friends, along with Ben. Like, the three of them were all very close. Whereas on the other side, we had Magic and Jen being very close. But we've seen that Ben and Addison and Ian hung out together outside of work. They were good friends. And the fact that Addison didn't know this yet. Ian has never shared this information with their close friend, Addison. So it's very powerful that they're deciding to open up at this moment, and feeling the bravery to tell this story.
Yes.
To someone who they're already very close with.
Right.
You know.
It is definitely not an easy thing to share. It's embarrassing. It's very personal, and definitely is something that was definitely brave to share. And like I said, it's a great scene. It highlights the mental health aspect of the transgender community that is generally what I focus on when I talk about any kind of issue.
Mm-hmm.
We have the car wash scene. The parents drop Gia off at the car wash, though again, not really.
Yeah, they're being their helicopter parents, and Ben is right in with it.
Yes, unfortunately, Ben doesn't really know how to handle the situation. I'm not sure he did any better than Carlos did in this episode. We certainly brought this up already, but I'm not sure what Ben accomplishes that Carlos wouldn't have.
Yeah, my big issue with the leap itself is, what did Ben do between the moment... Okay, so he put her in the game, the first game. He won the game. She runs away. In that moment, if Ben had leaped out again and Carlos had come back, Gia runs away, just like she did in the original history. The only difference is they won a basketball game.
Right.
She runs away. And I just have this really hard time seeing what has been done throughout this episode that keeps her from running away and disappearing.
And we'll get to, there's a scene coming up that we'll get to that nails that, like, that gets into that very specifically. Like, we get to this point and it's like, Ben changed nothing here. Like, history should just continue along as it is. It did in the original timeline, and she should run away. But that's not what happens.
Yeah.
So the kids are having fun until a couple of guys come to bully Gia from a car, throwing something at them.
They threw eggs.
Okay, I wasn't even sure what that was.
Yeah, why are those kids not getting in trouble? They are vandalizing this customer's car that's being washed.
Right.
They just threw eggs at the car.
Gia gets in trouble because she gets angry and throws the, what do you call that thing?
Like a squeegee?
The squeegee, okay. She throws a squeegee, which causes way more damage to a windshield than you would think.
It breaks a windshield, who belongs to
Marjorie.
None other than Marjorie, Amanda's mom, who is here running the car wash.
So, that was bad luck.
That was horrible that happened in that way.
And Gia, so Ben ends up interfering, revealing that he was, in fact...
there the whole time!
Right. Gia gets mad. She's mad on multiple reasons, because she was just bullied by these guys. She just broke the windshield of Marjorie, a person who's been against her this entire episode, and now Ben is showing up when he's not supposed to be there at all, because... he's supposed to go off, leave her there, and then go off and let her live her life.
Yeah.
But, so she's super pissed on a whole bunch of different levels, and she ends up running away.
Yep.
Addison comes in to reveal at that moment that Gia was never found because she died and the police misgendered her body.
So Ian and Ziggy found out what happened to her. The police misgendered the body, and that's why they never linked that this body is Gia Mendez.
Now, initially when this happened, I thought this was the scene where she would run away, but she still hasn't actually run away yet.
Yeah, she hasn't run away. Now, I don't know if maybe this is me lacking understanding, but I find it hard to believe that they never identified her body because the police misgendered it.
Yeah.
Now, so hear me out.
Okay.
The police found this body whenever ID'd this missing person. Gia has male genitalia. The body was identified as a male. Okay, because she's a minor, she is pre-surgery in her transition. She has male genitalia. That's what we're being told here by saying the police misgendered the body. They did not say this is a female youth. Now, wouldn't the parents and whoever's investigating Gia's disappearance have been looking for that?
Right.
Like, wouldn't they have been looking for a body that could have been identified as a male?
I mean, I would think so.
Like, did they never tell the police, oh, by the way, she's trans?
I would think they would very much have brought that up.
Right. So, I might be, like, totally missing the point here. And I mean, the point is that I'm sure this is an issue, right? Misidentifying bodies. But it just feels like, how is that what stopped them from connecting the dots? I feel like they would have been specifically looking for what they should have been looking for.
Right. I think it would have delayed the discovery of who that body belonged to,
I mean,
but I don't think...
especially because they didn't reveal how long it took before she died, where this body was found. I mean, she could have gone very far.
Right.
But...
in fact, for that matter, how does Addison, if the body was never identified properly, how does Addison even know?
Yeah, well,
like,
you know,
who?
Ziggy magic.
Ziggy magic, okay.
But, yeah. I mean, honestly, it's only been 10 years. So, it's conceivable that, like, they could have even, like, had a test run on stuff that's in evidence in the present day.
Maybe.
I don't know. But it just felt... it felt like, in this specific case, how is the gender of the body what stopped you from finding your daughter?
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Like, it felt like... I don't know. And again, this could just be me being ignorant to the topic, but it felt off to me, that whole reasoning behind why her body was never identified.
Well, if somebody has something to say about that, feel free to leave a comment about it.
Absolutely. We're here to discuss things.
Okay, we're back at home, the Mendez home. Gia's mother is on the phone with the principal, who's calling a meeting to protect the basketball team. This is obviously about Gia. Gia asks if her father is going to lose his job. Addison says that, yep, he's definitely good. Gia is right. You were going to lose your job, though it's weird that she says it that way because Gia didn't say you're going to lose your job. She asked, are you going to lose your job? So it should have been like, yes. I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah, Addison was saying that's what happened in this current history is Carlos was fired. Which also, like, okay, in this moment of history, in this iteration of our timeline, he's fired for letting her play in that first game. She didn't play in the next game because she runs away.
Right.
So the daughter's missing and then they fire him for the decision he made in yesterday's game.
Wow, that's a low blow. That's for sure.
Or was it literally that he was supposed to be fired in this scene, but that didn't happen?
Right. Yeah, I'm a little confused about that.
Right. And then, you know, when we get to the end of the episode of, you know, he's not going to get fired because he has an ally here. Where's that person in this timeline where he got fired?
Right.
So... yeah,
I'm not sure why the assistant principal didn't stick up for him in the original timeline over the new timeline.
Right.
I'm not sure
or
what
not the original timeline, but the post-credits timeline.
Right.
Because in the original timeline, he didn't lose a job because none of this happened.
The second timeline before we get to the third timeline.
Right.
Okay, anyway. Gia suggests quitting because she's not very good, but Ben won't let her. Ben says that he knows high school can be tough, and Gia ends up calling him out, saying, hey, look, you were like...
big man on campus.
What would you know about this?
Yeah. And
so he changes tactics and says that instead talks about his own experiences as Ben Song.
He says, have I ever told you about my friend Ben Song? And, you know, tries to assimilate their situations of how he was a different race than the people around him and always felt like an outsider. And Gia calls him out right away and says, no, that's great for your friend Ben. I'm sure he had a rough time, but that's not my story.
Right.
That's not what's happening here. You can't compare me to any experience you've had in your life. Right.
And, you know, Gia's story is basically she knows she's one person and everybody else is basically telling her differently.
Right. And she even mentions, like, even my mirror image tells me I'm not who I am.
Right.
Which should resonate with Ben.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I got to point out that Ben did not once bring up the fact that he has a fiance. Which
yes, he did not.
He's done that in at least the last couple of
But
episodes.
he did, in a later scene, make a comment that didn't fit for Carlos in a different way. So.
Oh, you'll have to remind me of that one. Gia says that she has to fight every day to fight for who she actually is, despite what everybody else is telling her that she's not. I don't even know if I just said that right, but we had the poetry scene.
Yes, we get to the poetry slam, which is a great scene.
Yeah, Jen and Magic are intense. They both find it funny. Until Dottie starts talking about something that on its face seems to describe what it's like to be transgender.
Right.
But Magic makes the link that it's about...
Yeah, so we come in with Dottie finishing one poem, which I'd love to hear that whole poem, because what the heck was she talking about? Something about Febreze and a toaster. And I was like, what is happening now? We're kind of given this moment where, like, Dottie seems kind of like a wackadoodle, right?
Just a little.
Do we trust what Dottie says? And Magic is kind of like, why am I sitting here listening to this? This doesn't feel helpful. And then Dottie goes on to do the next poem. And yeah, right. It was about Dottie's transgender journey. It mirrored perfectly Gia's just mention of a mirror image, because Dottie's talking about gazing into a mirror, and Magic sees something in what she's saying, because Magic has felt this before.
Right. He's had that exact
some
experience.
of the lines from the poem, Dottie says, gazing into a mirror, my face doesn't know who I am. So we're talking about what Gia was just talking about. But then she goes on to say, a future me I could never be. I am another, and the other is we. And Magic came to this conclusion, which they didn't spell it out for us in this moment, but I think we all realized the same thing Magic did is, wow, Dottie has been a host to a leaper.
And at that moment, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm getting along. Now I feel a little bit better about this whole nobody reveal that from last week.
Right. Is Dottie was the name, but it's bigger than that. It
doesn't change my opinion that they should have done this differently, but still it makes it a little better.
Yeah, the cliffhanger was weird, but we're told here there's more going on. There is a leaper involved. Definitely, they're taking the stance that there's a leaper at this point. And then Magic tells us that we know why Dottie didn't recognize Ben. In not so many words, saying Dottie wasn't the one who was there in those photos.
We then have the scene at the principal's office. The principal is saying that there's been significant community concern about Gia's participation on the basketball team.
So this is
saying it's not fair.
That emergency meeting to protect the team. So we've got the principal, we've got Gia's parents, which is Ben and Miriam are there. And then we've got Amanda's mother, Marjorie. That's who's in the principal's office. And then in the waiting room right outside the principal's office is Gia and Amanda.
Sounds a little awkward to me.
Why is this the meeting you called to protect the girls' basketball team?
Yeah.
If you want to have a meeting with Gia's parents, why is Marjorie in this room?
Right.
This whole meeting just seems super weird to me.
Right. Well, I mean, that was probably the justification the principal gave, but that's not what actually the meeting is about.
It felt like this meeting is because the two girls had a fight.
Right.
And they didn't.
It is set up like that, with them sitting out in the hallway like that.
Like, that's what would happen. If two students get into a fight, you call all the parents in to talk about it.
Right.
But they didn't.
Right.
Amanda does have this stance where she's, kind of pissed off and upset with Gia, but it's her mother that's causing all the issues.
Right.
Nothing actually happened between Gia and Amanda.
Nope. Marjorie in the scene ends up speaking bravely for intolerance. Meanwhile, Amanda and Gia are waiting outside while they make awkward small talk. Gia's not really into it. She's kind of blowing off the question. Amanda ends up asking, oh, so you preparing for college? And Gia's like, no, I'm just trying to survive high school. She ends up trying to get Amanda to basically
accept her.
Right, and say whether she supports Amanda being on, or Gia being on the team or not. And Amanda won't do it.
Okay, so this is where we can really start looking at my issue here. So there's three things. It's also
my issue.
There's three things that happen to resolve this story. Okay, one is Gia ends up not runned away and disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
The other two is Amanda, as well as the whole team, supports Gia and refuses to play without her. And the third thing is that Marjorie is now in the stands supporting Gia.
Right.
Those are the three avenues I'm looking at as to what has changed here. Ben did not make any of these changes happen. That's what I'm looking at in this scene. So this scene, Gia won over Amanda.
Right.
That's what's happening in this moment.
And we barely justify that.
We barely justify that, but Ben certainly didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
Ben's not even in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So Gia's talking to Amanda, and in this conversation, wins her over and gets her to say, yeah, we're on the same team. So Amanda has some revelation in this conversation, and this totally changes her actions the rest of the episode, which
Right.
I don't buy, but I totally don't buy that Ben had anything to do with it.
Right. No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
So how did this not what happened the first time? That's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then happening in the other room,
The Office, yep.
in the office, so we have this conversation now going between the mothers.
And Marjorie ends up bringing up Title IX and the fight for women's sports.
Right. She says,
Totally missing the irony.
she says,
during this
I
conversation.
had to fight, we didn't have girls sports when I was in high school. We had to fight for it for Title IX. And Gia's mom, Miriam, has this back and forth with Marjorie. And I kind of see this as a mirrored discussion, Gia and Amanda, and now we've got the mothers having a kind of similar moment where I feel like this is where Miriam kind of won Marjorie over and made her realize somehow during this conversation that was not enough, that, oh wait, maybe I'm looking at this wrong.
Yeah, it's hard to justify where Marjorie was in her ideology. That does not change over with this one conversation to where she is at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
That's not justified at all.
No.
Amanda and Gia was barely justified. This is not justified at all.
Yeah, it was I could see like a spark in her eye where she was like, oh wait, you're defending your daughter.
Right.
You're defending your child.
The same thing that Marjorie is doing.
The way I'm defending my child. But the bigger point is Ben didn't do it.
Right. Ben was barely a factor in that scene.
Ben wasn't the one talking to the mother. Mm-hmm. It was the other mother. They were having this conversation. So, how is this a change that the leap has caused?
Right. So far, nothing that Ben has done has changed anything.
Yeah.
Other than his initial actions in the beginning of this episode when he put Gia in the game.
Right. But once we got that second timeline where Gia still runs away and Carlos gets fired, how have we fixed that?
And we haven't.
And and I'll say this again, we've said this in other episodes, I criticize from a place of love.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love the show. I'm going to be critical of points. That's what I do. I criticize media that I watch.
See, I don't feel like being a stan is very interesting. It's not interesting for me to do, and it's not interesting for me to listen to. So, yeah, I talk about the things that I love from a critical perspective, because that's what's interesting to me.
Right.
Just being rah-rah, quantum leap, that's not interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, yes, we like what you just said, we criticize out of love. So, yeah, this is not totally constructed very well. The principal thinks that it's best for everybody concerned if Gia goes back to the bench. Mm-hmm. And she says that the agreement that they originally had was that Gia was not to play, but that she could practice with the team.
Yeah.
Gia ends up overhearing this and gets pissed off.
Right, because Gia didn't know. This is a secret her parents had from her, that when he took the job as the coach, the contingency was they let Gia on the team. She's allowed to go in uniform and sit on the bench and practice with them. There was an agreement that her father agreed, I will not ever put her in a game.
And I gotta ask, what is the point of that?
To protect her. They didn't want her in the spotlight, which is where the mother was coming from the first time we met her.
Right.
And it's them being super overprotective again. And again, to the point where he made his career being there to watch her and protect her. He's not there to help her play. He's not there to help her become a professional athlete. He's not there to support the let them play cause. He's there to watch his daughter and make sure she's protected from life, which is not how it works.
So when it comes down to it, Carlos is not an ally.
Right.
He's, what was the other? He's an accomplice. No, wait, I'm sorry.
Other way around.
Right, okay.
He supports her.
Carlos is not an accomplice. He's an ally.
He supports her.
He's in the stands waving the flag.
But he's not actively helping her. He thinks he is. He thinks he is. The parents think that they're doing everything they can do, but they're doing too much.
They're not bad people, but they are definitely misguided.
Yeah.
Because their heart is in the right place.
This is why Gia ends up running away, and presumably why she ran away in every iteration of this timeline, including, when she never even played at all, because she comes to this realization, my dad was never going to let me play. Like, literally, this was in his agreement to the job that I'm not allowed to play in a game. Why am I on this team if I'm not allowed to play?
Right.
And very justifiably, she's upset.
I would be too.
Yeah, she's pissed off at her parents and the principal and the entire school community, and it's rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. She ends up going to Kate, who thinks that Gia's plan to run away and be on her own is harebrained, which it is. She makes a reference during this scene to the plague, which I presume is about HIV.
I took that presumption. Now, let me back up for one moment. Before we see where Gia ended up with Kate, we had this scene with Ben and Miriam where they realized she's gone. She took their van.
Oh, right.
Okay. And we had this great scene where, Miriam's trying to figure out what to do. Addison's there desperately trying to find out where did she go. They realize this is the moment she runs away. And this is that line that you told me to remind you of. Ben says in this moment, well, it's not my first runaway kid.
Yeah, okay. I do remember that line.
Which it's the I have a fiance version of what we get in this episode.
It's a little bit more forgivable.
Yeah, absolutely. But his wife looks at him like, what the heck are you talking about? I don't know this story.
Yeah.
And he's, referencing, oh gosh, what was the name of that episode? Where he was a runaway kid.
That Stand By Me type episode.
Stand By Ben.
Yeah, Stand By Ben. Of course.
Ben.
Yeah, there we go.
That's what he's referencing, I assume.
Yes, yeah. In that case, he actually was the runaway kid.
Yeah, with a group of runaway kids who he was trying to convince to stop running. Was there another one that involved
a runaway kid?
I feel like there was another something that could be referenced there.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. So in this moment, and here we are again, Gia's run away, and I'm sitting here saying...
We're back to the original conversation.
Why? What changed between Timeline 2 and this moment where we save Gia? And I'm looking at Ben's actions, right? Because Ben is the variable here.
Right.
Ben is who leaped in and is changing things. Anything that happens different has to be an influence of what Ben does. And he asks for his wife's phone. And I think he realized, and they don't even tell us, but I come to the conclusion after watching this episode twice that he called Kate. He said, give me your phone to his wife because Kate earlier told him, I gave your wife my phone number. So he knows Kate's phone number is in the phone and he calls Kate. That's what's happening in the cut between these two scenes.
Now, my question is, why didn't Carlos do that in the original timeline?
Why didn't Carlos and the wife do that? But moreover, and then we get into this scene with Kate, how does him actually calling her change the outcome?
Right. Because
from this scene, from everything Kate tells us, tells Gia in this scene, which I also felt this was kind of unusual to have this whole scene that didn't have Ben present. It didn't have anyone from the project present. It was a scene that we saw between two characters in the past outside of our leaper or anything else. Like we don't see that often.
And it was between two trans characters.
It was a great scene. And we got to Kate and the audience. No, Gia and the audience got to hear Kate's story. This is how it was different for me. And it was a beautiful scene, and I loved the dialogue. But to the leap, I can't imagine that Kate would have done anything different simply because the parents didn't call her.
Right.
Kate would have called the parents.
Right. If she didn't, she'd be negligent.
I can't see.
And I can't see Kate being like that.
I can't see this playing out where this scene happened and Kate just said, "I'm washing my hands of it." She ran away. I cannot see a place where Kate would have. I mean, obviously she didn't help her. Gia came to Kate asking for money to help her run away. She wasn't going to give her money, and she didn't in the original second history, because Gia didn't make it. She failed at running away. But I can't see a scenario where Kate wouldn't have been like, "Sit down, let's figure this out together. I'm going to go call your parents."
And given their relationship, I don't see any scenario where Gia doesn't stay along, with her to discuss those issues.
Right.
Like, I don't see at this point Gia herself doing anything differently from this scene.
So we're left with, this is a beautiful story, beautiful scenes, but what changed? What did Ben do in this leap, like between the first basketball game and the second basketball game? What changed?
And the answer, really, when it comes down to it, is nothing.
Yeah. So aside from that, beautiful episode. We'll go ahead and talk about that scene with Kate.
Okay. So she ends up saying that she didn't go to school. She said it wasn't an option that was available to her. I don't know why not exactly. I'm not sure. I'm not really familiar with the history. I'm guessing she was like a kid in the 80s.
Well, yeah, so she's, a couple decades older than Gia. And basically I get she's trying to tell Gia how lucky Gia is that she has the support system she has.
Right.
And she knows it still sucks.
Right. Things are better than what they were. But
right. You have it better than I ever did. And Gia's like, "Why don't you think I can make it? You made it." And she's like, "Yeah, but I didn't go to school. I didn't have parents who loved me. I was on my own, and it sucked. And I saw a lot of people who didn't make it."
Right.
And I think that was, her story is she quit school and ran away and did the best she could, and she made it. But she saw, like I said, a lot of people in her community didn't make it.
Right.
Between just not being able to deal with this whole situation, and then she was also talking about HIV playing a factor in that time period,
which was heavily prevalent during that time. Much more of an issue back then than it is now.
Yep.
Still an issue, but it's not a death sentence anymore.
Right. And within the queer community specifically, it was, like she said, it was a plague.
Right. Ben and his wife drives up. Gia calls them out on being the ones that make the rules, and that they need to let her leave her life, make mistakes, instead of stifling her by trying to make her safe all the time. Now, initially, when I watched this episode, I didn't notice this stuff. Everything happens so super fast in this series that it's hard to catch these things. When I watched the second time, I definitely noticed what she was talking about and what we've talked about them being helicopter parents. Yeah. Initially, I did not notice that.
Yeah, what she said was, let me quote it. "You have to stop treating her transness as a burden, and she'll stop feeling like one." In other words,
and that is a very good line.
You are making it worse by making it such a thing.
Right.
It's not such a thing. The world might look at it as such a thing, but you got to let your daughter be a teenager.
Right.
She's not allowed to hang out with friends. She's on this team that she's not allowed to play on.
Right.
Like, you have to let her live.
Absolutely.
And she's going to face adversity.
Now,
she's going to face harassment. She's going to face terrible people. But she has to do that in order to live her life and grow up and be a functioning adult.
Even as a parent of a straight child, I guess I'll say it like that, there's a line you have to walk between protecting them, keeping them safe, and letting them live their lives, make mistakes, and learn from them.
Right.
So yeah, like this is not a good idea for any kid.
Right, and
regardless.
that's like what I was saying is really we're getting this sub story here. It's we're getting the trans story, but we're also getting this story about parenting, and it's not specific to the fact that they have a trans child. It's the fact that they're using something in their child's life as a justification for their parenting style, which isn't productive.
Right. And actively damages
Yeah.
the kids involved.
Right.
It would have been better if Ben weren't here for this speech. I think Carlos was the one that needed to hear
Needed
that.
to hear it, right, because
Yeah.
he's not going to know any of this.
Right. Ben is having this moment, but Carlos should be the one having that moment to change his actions. They end up hugging, and Ben says that they have a basketball game to go to if Gia is up for it. Gia asks, what about Ben's job? Her mother says that the most important job they have is being parents.
Right. And remember, the only reason he has the job in the first place is for her. So,
Right.
kind of like, who cares about the job?
Right. At the school, Gia embraces her teammate, the one that's been the most supportive so far in this episode.
Yeah, and I think that was Shruti.
Shruti? I never knew her name.
One of them is Shruti. I think that was her.
Okay. We have the teammate leads her into the locker room, the girls' locker room. And yes, this entire scene is super cheesy, but I'm a sucker for it. I love it.
We've crossed that pivotal threshold where now everybody supports her.
Right.
Except for, of course, we still end up with, these unnamed haters in the crowd. But yeah, the whole team supports her now.
Including Amanda.
Amanda is her biggest cheerleader in this scene.
Which makes no sense, but whatever.
Yeah. So Gia got her to say, yeah, we're on the same team. But yeah, we have a full 180 here.
Right.
And it is. It's very like high school movie easy. Yeah,
we've gone from an episode from a trans perspective and talking about trans issues to basically a straight up sports movie, basically. I mean, we still have those aspects, but it's gone full cheesy sports cliche.
It was just like, Gia's really like, we're not a team without you.
Right, and that was not the attitude before.
I can see her.
Even from the people who supported her, that was not the attitude before.
Right, like nobody was really like pushing for Gia. Like they supported her. She was clearly had friends here, but and then also to the point we know, like she's never been allowed to hang out with people. So how good of friends can they really be? Like they don't even socialize outside of school.
We see Ben on the sidelines preparing to write the starting lineup. Gia is in it. The ref asks if he's sure about it, and what's the ref saying? Why is the ref involved in this conversation? Go ref the game. Anyway. But the ref basically is behind it. I don't really care about his opinion, but whatever. The principal is less enthused.
Yeah.
Asking if he really wants
it a stunt.
Right. And again, her attitude here is just so horrible, given the fact that she is a black person whose people experienced a ton of discrimination and, not having equal rights. It's just mind-blowing that this person does not see
a black female who has overcome adversity in her life to become an administrator of this, big high school.
She should have more sympathy for Gia than she does.
Right.
And I get what you were saying earlier about her taking the administration stance. She's become a company man.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still. So she asks, do you really want to lose your job over this? And Ben says, you might not want to stand up for my daughter, but there's a locker room full of girls that will not play without her. And we're going to go and win or get to the regionals.
Yeah, if we win this game, we go to regionals. That's what you want, so back off and let me do it. And let me coach my team.
Right. Ben says this fully confident, but when the principal walks away, we see Ben's expression change. And he looks a little bit less confident, which I liked. On one side of the bleachers, we had the supporters for Gia. Yeah. And on the other side, we have the haters.
The haters. Who were there in the first team. It's the first game. It's the same haters up on one side of the stands. But there's a lot of supporters there for her as well. And Marjorie is right in the middle of the supporters holding up signs. Go Gia.
That's the part that got me the most. Is that's totally not believable.
Yeah. I can see her coming to some acceptance that Gia's on the team, but she's not going to be in the stands rooting for her.
Right.
She's going to be rooting for her daughter.
Right.
Put my daughter in. Give her the chance she missed out on when she hurt her ankle.
While grudgingly accepting Gia's presence.
And then we have a line between Amanda and Gia where Amanda says, get open, I'll throw you the ball. Right,
a totally unselfish teammate all of a sudden, when before all she cared about was impressing the scouts.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just don't believe this.
Yeah, it was they tipped the scale a little too far.
The game gets off to a bad start where they go down 4 points. Ben calls a timeout and asks Gia what's the matter. And Gia points to the crowd, says, why did they let them in there?
Yeah.
Now, in her position, she should have expected that. Right. She should have expected the haters and found some kind of strategy to dealing with that. Ben points out that there are only a few haters in the stands and that there are many more there to support her.
Yeah, he tells her to look at the other side where we see all of these great supportive people with their signs. And we see Kate is there in the stands, and she quickly picks up on what's happening on the court and takes this really long sign that people are holding and starts shifting the sign. And they go stand in front of the haters and block the hater signs with their supportive sign, which I thought that was beautiful.
Ben ends up giving a speech, which I thought was pretty good. Given the fact that he's never been a basketball coach before, he gives a pretty good speech here.
But remember, whatever he does now didn't fix anything.
Right.
It's already been fixed, and he didn't do anything before.
Actually, technically, Ben shouldn't even still be here because, everything's been resolved. Right.
Well, it tells you, the fact that he hasn't left yet tells you what he's really here to do was win this game and get them to regionals.
Gotcha. All right. The speech is enough to turn around the game. Back at the project, we see the team is being watched by the project people, the people that work at the project. Addison invites Ian into the imaging chamber, which apparently is against the rules.
Yeah, they say so against the rules.
Right. Ian points out that Addison is an accomplice, which is where we pay off that little moment earlier in the episode.
Yeah. Which, the first time I watched this, I totally missed that.
Yeah.
I missed that reference, and I took this as, you're breaking the rules. Addison said, all I'm doing is holding a door open. And I thought Ian was calling Addison out as an accomplice to breaking the rules.
Right.
And it wasn't until second view that I was like, oh, we're talking about allies and accomplices. Got it.
Right.
Like, this concept was totally missed on me the first time.
And I thought that was a very nice moment for the two of them. Back in the past, the assistant principal, Griffin, talks to Ben, telling him that the principal sent him to pull Gia out of the game. But he's not going to do that.
Yep.
Because school sports is about helping the kids build confidence and work together as a team. Also, he's the union rep, and if they try to fire him, he's going to have his back.
Right. Which was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said earlier, where was he the first time that Carlos got fired?
Right. Yeah, why didn't he support him then? Is it because they're winning the game now?
Right.
Some ally, or actually, I guess that would make him an ally and not an accomplice. The game goes on. Addison and Ian cheer them on. The ref is dancing. Hey, ref, you're supposed to be neutral here. Like, you're not supposed to be actively rooting for one team or the other.
Right.
Cut that shit out.
It is the same ref from the last game.
It is. Yeah.
So whose side is he on?
Gia ends up taking a long three and makes a shot to win the game. Ben leaps out as he yells in triumph. Mm-hmm. And everybody else stays there. Like, Addison and Ian are in the crowds, which felt weird. Yeah. Because isn't the whole imaging chamber supposed to melt away the second Ben leaps? We've seen that in this series. Yes, this is the second time that we're seeing that. So, yeah, they're inconsistent with how that's working. Right. Unless, are they trying to say Ian has to hit a button on the outside to make that image disappear, maybe? That wasn't suggested in the original series. The original series, definitely not in the original series. Al specifically said that he went back to the imaging chamber like once Sam leaped out, and that was that. Yeah. In the future. Okay, before we jump to the future, I just want to make one comment about this basketball game leap out here. It totally felt like we're nodding to the leap home. Oh yeah, okay, I see that. So in Leap Home, which is when Sam got to leap into himself, the centralized
I mean, the centralized thing was he was trying to fix his family, but what like Ziggy said he was there to do was to win a basketball game, to send his basketball team to regionals.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And
I didn't catch that.
he leaped out right after making the winning shot.
Mm.
So obviously he's not the player here, but it was that same really kind of moment. Like I saw it, where it's like, oh, we're gonna go to regionals. Winning shot happens, and then Ben leaps out. So I really like felt a nod to that moment.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was intentional or not, but
it might have been. It could have very well have been.
And to that as well, it plays in to what's going on in the next scene. Magic talking about his leap. Because it was right after that moment when Sam leaped from the basketball game
into Magic. Oh,
into
yeah.
Magic.
Okay. Yeah.
Like he leaped into Magic 2 seconds later.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Huh. I didn't think of any of that. Yeah, so he reveals that he had a similar experience as to what Dottie was talking about. Missing time, and he wonders if Dottie has ever thought about who was driving the bus. And I guess Dottie has, because she made some sketches. And that person ends up being Ian.
Ooh.
So Ian leaped into Dottie at some point in this unspecified future.
Dottie. Well, yeah, a future version of Ian leaped into Dottie 6 months prior to Ben leaping.
Right.
And was there for a week. We were told that this was a week of Dottie's life that she lost. So, do we know what that means? No.
But it certainly is interesting.
But it's news.
Yes. And that helps pay off that whole reveal.
Right. So the name was Dottie, but the person was Ian.
Which is totally acceptable. It is a person we know.
We know, yeah.
And
and it confirms that there was definitely leaping involved, which, I mean, we assume there had to be, right? In giving Ben this information. So let's talk a second. What do you think this could mean? Like, where do you think this is going?
Well,
where could this be going? And I feel like it's going to get complicated.
Okay, so whatever happens to Addison in some unspecified point in the future obviously involves Ian.
Yeah.
So Ian ends up being a part of this and ends up getting into the quantum leap accelerator, and for some reason leaps into Dottie. I don't know if that was a deliberate choice or if he was just targeting that time frame and just, he ended up someplace random.
Yeah. Could it have been feeling some a kinship to her?
Yeah, that's possible, actually, because they're both transgender characters.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. So he ends up meeting up with Ben to tell him that something bad was going to happen.
To tell him whatever he tells him that convinces him to go to Janice.
Right.
And leads to 6 months later him leaping.
So whoever it is that we can't trust the project, that person is not Ian.
Right, because Ian is the one who set Ben and Janice on the journey. So, presumably, there wasn't anything negative happening from Ian's perspective.
Right, it wasn't Ian himself that was the mistrustworthy one.
Right.
But, does Ben know that Dottie was Ian at that point?
Right, I question that too. Did Ian tell Ben, it's me, Ian, from the future?
Right.
Which Ben would believe, right? Because how would Dottie know about leaping?
Right.
Or did Ian say, hey, I'm Dottie, but I got some information for you?
Right.
And I feel like it's going to become a complicated discussion, and I hope that they don't miss the mark where people don't understand it. So this also, okay, so this isn't our Ian.
Right.
This Ian is from the timeline that's already been erased by Ben leaping. So is our Ian going to end up in this position in the future where they still have to fulfill this role? Or has this Ian completely disappeared because of the timeline change?
Yeah, we're already causing a paradox here.
Right. Now, I think it's safe to assume that our Ian in this moment doesn't know any of this. I think it's safe to assume that they don't know that they leapt.
Right.
Unless they went to themselves as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
And is there a reason they didn't go to themselves?
Yeah, I think they would have an easier time convincing themselves
than Ben.
Yeah. but
crazy.
right.
So this original timeline Ian, at some point in the future, we don't know when, knows that something's happening that Addison needs to be saved from, which we still don't exactly know what that means. Like, is it directly like she's about to die, or like, is it more of a complicated concept than that? Like, we don't really know exactly what that means, save Addison, right?
Right.
And then leaps. So, like, I'm questioning, is Addison leaping in this history? Are we already at the point where the project's happening, Addison's leaping, Ben's the hologram, and Ian steps in to help?
Maybe Ian was the hologram instead of Ben.
Well, Ben was hired to be the hologram.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like there's so much here, and that they're wrapping this up. They said they're wrapping this main story up this season, so there's really
they
only
have like 6 episodes to tell this story.
So I think this is going to start coming hard and fast. Like, we're going to get more and more of this. I think the leaps are going to become less important as we step more into talking about these timelines happening at the project, which I'm okay with, you know, as long as they're not trying to do that at the same time they're trying to do a big, powerful leap. Right.
They can't do that. These episodes are rushed as they are.
Yeah, I'm okay with them having a leap take the back seat and be something minimal that we really don't spend a lot of time in, because we're dealing with this in the present, future, old, past, present time thing.
I'm not even going to try to follow that.
Yeah, because we got to see, like, what happened in that original timeline and that future of the original timeline that doesn't exist. How does it fit into our current future of the timeline trajectory we're on?
Right.
How does Ben leaping fix whatever this problem is?
Isn't that always the question?
I mean, of course, that's the question, right? But, like, it's getting more intense. Like, Ian is the one who went to Ben to tell him to leap. A future version of Ian.
And unlike this episode where Ben really wasn't a factor in how history changed, he needs to be a factor in this big story.
Right.
So, yeah, you know, there's been a couple episodes where we've had that criticism where, like, what the heck did Ben change?
And that criticism happened, we talked about this off camera, like, this isn't unique to this show. Like, there are certainly episodes of the original series where it's like, okay, what did Sam actually do?
Right.
Why did this fix anything? Why is he leaving? What changed?
Right.
It's not uncommon to this episode or this series. It's an underlying issue when dealing with time travel.
I think that in the case of this episode, that was less important to the overall message that they were trying to say.
And I think people watching the episode probably wouldn't pick up on that. I think the only reason we pick up on that is because we're sitting here taking notes, trying to nitpick the episode.
Right.
That we came to the realization that, wait, what happened?
Right. Okay, so the episode ended, by the way, with a title card. I'll read that because it might be important to some people who are listening.
Well, there was a leap out.
Yes. Yes, there was a leap out.
There was a leap out. It was brief. We saw Ben is a sous chef in a kitchen. I found it interesting that he's got an earring in his nose, which
would indicate that he's somewhat younger, like a younger character.
More to me, it was making me question, would we see that? Or, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, we would see it because it's physically
Ben's nose is not
there.
Pierced.
Ben's nose is not pierced, but Ben's body's not there.
Right, okay.
But would we see that in Ben's vision, or would we only see that in the mirror?
I mean, we see the clothes that Ben is wearing, so...
Yeah. I don't know. It threw me seeing that earring for some reason. Anyways, there was a brief leap out, and then... go ahead with it. Gave us a title card.
Yeah, the title card reads as follows. If you are trans and experiencing a crisis or you know someone who is, please call the Trans Lifeline at 877-565-8860 or visit translifeline.org for help. And so next week's episode is titled Family Style.
Oh, there was a title given?
Yeah, I looked it up at Spoiler TV because that's where I get my information.
I hadn't seen a title. I was looking for a title because I made the thumbnail for this week's YouTube, and I was like, let me do the next one at the same time, but I couldn't find the title. But it's not next week.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The next episode, according to the trailers, February 20th. So we have another off week next week.
A couple weeks, I think, right?
No.
No, just 1 week?
Next week's Valentine's Day, so it's the week after that.
Oh, okay.
So we have 1 week off, which is frustrating that we keep having such inconsistent schedules. And we knew Greg
Gorgarius,
thank you, had tweeted that there were going to be 2 off weeks still during the remaining run. So this is going to be one of them. And then that means we'll still have 1 more week off at some point before we finish the season.
Yeah, and a lot of fans are going to be, like they were before, frustrated that we just came back from a break and now we're going to have another break again.
It is frustrating.
NBC does this a lot.
They do this a lot. And with This Is Us, it was because of COVID filming that it was very inconsistent in like those last couple of seasons. But I don't feel like that's a factor anymore.
No.
I feel like they made this season schedule really wonky. I get that there has to be breaks.
Yeah.
But it's like show an episode, have 2 weeks off. Show 2 episodes, have a week off. It feels really inconsistent. And I don't know if I quite understand their choices for when they put these breaks.
Yeah, well, in one case, it was because of the NFL playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't think the Super Bowl has anything to do with, like,
No,
the
the
next
Super
week
Bowl's
break.
on Sunday.
Right.
So why does Monday night get affected by that? I don't feel like it does.
It wouldn't. So I'm not really sure.
Now, Tuesday is Valentine's Day.
Right.
La Brea is off. Or no, wait. I'm wrong. La Brea comes back on Valentine's Day. They took 2 weeks off, and then they're coming back on Valentine's Day. I would think maybe you take Valentine's Day off because people are going to be busy that evening if you're looking for a date to take off. But that doesn't even explain any of this because it's the Monday, not the Tuesday.
So, yeah, I'm not sure why we're taking a break. I'm sure I could look it up and find information on that, but I haven't done it yet.
But, yeah, the show will be back February 20th with episode 13.
And that's titled Family Style, as I mentioned. The title's description reads as follows. When Ben leaps into an Indian family to try and prevent their beloved family restaurant from burning down, he finds an emotional connection with their... I don't even know how to pronounce this. How do you pronounce that word?
Where are we?
Right here.
Matriarch.
That's right.
The mother of the family.
Right.
Probably a grandmother.
I knew what it meant. I just couldn't
the
pronounce
eldest female in the family.
Okay, so he has an emotional connection with the matriarch through memories of his own. Magic and Jen share a surprising revelation with Ian. Now, that to me indicates that they're about to tell him.
They're going to tell Ian about the leap. And Ian's not going to know.
Right.
Yeah.
So the
trailer, I hadn't read that description. The trailer didn't go into any of that. The trailer basically just gave us the information that it's a family-owned Indian restaurant, and the restaurant's going to fail if Ben doesn't do something.
Now,
which seems like a lighter leap.
Right.
As far as, like, issues go.
If we're going to marginalize the leap, that seems like the episode to do it.
Yep.
So if we're going to get it more into the project side and push that story along, this next coming episode seems like the time to do it.
And hopefully they don't try to do too much on both ends.
Right.
And give us, another
pilot episode.
I was trying to say the name of the episode, but I don't know the date. It was something 1985.
Right. The year is the only part of that I remember.
Where, they did too much in one episode, which was trying to introduce all the characters, give us this really big, powerful story, and give us everything happening on the project, which was too much for 40-something minutes of television.
And that's a frequent problem with this series.
Yes.
Is it tries to cram a lot in 40 minutes.
A lot. To the point where I often feel like they cut something out here that was important.
Right. They definitely skimp over details, or they give it to us lightning fast that you don't even pick up on it.
Yeah. Like, you have to watch these episodes more than once.
Right.
If you're trying to really follow everything.
Basically. Do you have any other thoughts on this week's episode?
No, I think we covered everything. Again, I thought it was beautifully done. Kudos to everybody involved. And my only criticism is that we didn't quite fulfill what I expect to see from the leap itself. Like, where I just logically, I felt like there was a step missing in what did Ben do. But that's not a criticism of the episode per se. Like, I thought it was a beautiful script. I thought they did a great job telling the story. I thought the actors were wonderful. The writers did a great job. I feel like where we're progressing with this project story is exciting.
It's definitely interesting.
I want to keep going. I wonder if we're going to see Dottie again. Or if that was enough to just tell us that Dottie wasn't involved at all.
Well, I think Shekinah is a part of the series as as far as the creative team goes. I think she's been hired as a writer, so
Yeah.
she's still around.
She works in the writer's room, definitely. Right. So they could easily put Dottie in other scenes if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, they're not going to make Dottie like a title character, but we could definitely see a reprisal of that role, which I'm here for. I'd like to see that, especially if we ever get to see a version of events like what did happen in the original timeline.
And I think we should see those.
I want to see. I want to see, and I mentioned this last week. That when who was it? It was Magic and one of his heart-to-hearts during that episode.
Jen?
Where, it was when Magic was talking with Jen about how he regretted not letting Janice on the project.
Yes.
And there was just, it really felt like that conversation just kept rolling around the fact, what would it have been like if she was here all along? I really feel like there was an alternate history, like timeline there to show us, and like that could come into play if they start playing with how did the timelines play out and changing history. And, I think that'd be fun to give us these kind of almost bottle episodes of this is what could have happened differently. This is what happened in the first timeline. Like all of these other perspectives that we could see, dealing with a time travel story.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be very interesting.
And I could totally see there being, here's what happened when Ian leaped, and here is Shekinah playing Ian in a leap. Like
that won't get convoluted or complicated.
I mean, we would see Ian.
Right. Oh, yes.
We would see Ian, but then we'd have like Shekinah in the mirror image. That could be fun. Like that sounds like we need to see that. Yeah,
I definitely. You sold me. I definitely want to see that now.
Yeah, meeting with Ben.
Right.
The Ben we've never met, the Ben that wasn't ever planning on leaping.
Right. All right, so we would like to hear from you. Stacie can be reached at...
I can be reached on Twitter at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join one of my Core Productions Facebook pages. Actually, I have another Quantum Leap group that I apparently moderate that I had no idea about. I guess I was made a moderator at some point.
Okay.
You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Core Productions and Stacie, signing off.